Tourists who love to see elk, love to see bison, they're going to be very concerned about this. The hunters are going to be very concerned about this. Conservationists and cattle ranchers. Put all those groups together, and that's a majority of the GYE. A lot of the interest in the project is about how we're going to end up managing the animals.
So one of our central questions is, how often are bison and elk transmitting brucellosis back and forth? Historically, brucellosis was widespread across the cattle population, and since that time, the Department of Agriculture has been working to remove it from cattle operations, and that's been successfully done, with the exception of the Yellowstone ecosystem, which is now the last reservoir for brucellosis in the country. And there it infects bison and elk, and sporadically infects cattle.
First of all, why are we concerned about brucellosis? So some people, that's immediately where they go. Why do we care about this? Because it could eventually affect how we manage animals, and it has affected how we've managed bison.
So brucellosis is a bacterial infection caused by a bacteria that's called Brucella abortus. It's sort of like the common cold, where it creates a symptom that then allows it to be transmitted onwards. Brucellosis basically gravitates towards the reproductive tract and then causes an abortion event because it gets in the way of normal birthing processes. That abortion event then has lots of bacteria on it. Other individuals come up and investigate. They get the bacteria in their bodies. If they're female and later they get pregnant, then the same thing repeats itself. So it seems like a simple question just to assess what is the transmission rate between different species. But transmission itself is not actually visible. So you need to use all these different approaches to try to make some inference about how much transmission is happening. It ends up taking all these different people with different expertise working together to try to get at that question.
I am working on understanding the relationship between elk grouping patterns and brucellosis increases. Historically, higher levels of brucellosis in elk have been associated with elk that are on the Wyoming feeding grounds. Recently, we've been seeing increases in brucellosis off the feed grounds. We're interested in knowing whether or not that has anything to do with density or elk group size. By looking at the genetics of Brucella and the animals, we can understand the patterns of how this parasite has been moving across the landscape.
It's sort of like searching for a needle in the haystack. First, we need to not only catch the animal, but we need to catch the right kind of animal, one that's already seen the disease. If they've got it, they need to still have the bacteria in their body. Then we need to be able to grow it in a petri dish. We can extract the DNA, put it into a genomic sequencer. Then we start looking at how those sequences differ between different regions and in different hosts. The genetic sequence from the brucellosis samples allows us to connect samples to one another through time. When you get a mutation, that can then be inherited down the line. And so when samples have the same mutation, you know that they link more closely in history. We can look at those differences among species and among locations to try to estimate how much transmission is occurring. most cattle infections are probably coming from elk. One of the things that we found in our research program is that the elk problem is expanding in range and increasing in intensity. This has been a controversy for the last 50 years probably on how should this be managed. The science helps inform how effective one management strategy might be over another one. So some of our future questions are going to be, where is it spreading and how quickly is it going to get there?